what are we standing up for? The ability, the freedom to do what's right as God defines that right.
God's the ultimate author of liberty.
We don't want government to stand between us and our freedom to do what is right.
Hello and welcome to the Bible Nation podcast. I'm Doug Levesque from the Bible Nation Society. You can check us out at BibleNation.org. As always, we have two experts in their fields here with us in the broadcast studio today. And we have Mr. Tony Nash of AZ Business Solutions. Good to have you, Tony.
It's good to be here, always.
Yes. All right. We're going to be talking about an interesting subject today regarding economics and how do you survive doing business today. You know, what does the Bible help us in this cultural thing? And then, of course, we have Pastor Jason Georges of the Emmanuel Baptist Church of Corunna, Michigan. He's one of these guys are chief movers and shakers, influencers in Michigan, and I appreciate them coming together with us. We're weekly meeting for a podcast, and BibleNation.org has all of our podcasts, and of course we're promoting those on Facebook, and you can do a search at YouTube, but we're glad to have you watching. We appreciate it. We have a unique topic today. We are all here in mid-March, a week away from spring. There's a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. But all of us are under an economic pinch right now. And so we are talking about, this is Pastor Jason's term, the tyranny of inflation.
It's a good term.
Yeah.
Surviving rising costs. We thought we'd get real practical today because everybody's paying $4 to $5 gas right now. And that's increasing the price
That's just in the Midwest.
of everything, manufacturing, transportation, and everybody's having to spend more. We're not necessarily making any more. And so that's putting a real crunch on budgets, whether you're a church doing ministry, whether you're a business, whether you're an individual. Everybody's having to recalibrate right now. And so I thought this is a great topic for us. The tyranny of inflation, surviving rising costs. Well, here's a great article from Time Magazine. And it's inflation remained at a 40-year high in February. Here's what costs more and how to plan for it. In other words, it was already at a 40-year high before the war started.
Yeah.
So we were already in a huge conundrum. We were already crashing and burning, going off the cliff before this happened. I think Putin looked at this and thought, this is a great time for me to do this because nobody can really do anything about it.
Right.
You know, at this point in time, this is a weak point for everybody, and that's where it's going to go. I don't know that. I can't get in Putin's mind. But Time Magazine said, you know, how do we plan for this thing? What do we do? And of course, they use a hypothetical. I guess it's a real couple in Atlanta, Mike and Britt Miller, couple in their 30s living in Atlanta, Georgia, and they're having to reevaluate their budget and become extra cautious of their spending. And, you know, put it down like on a Mother Goose fairy tale sort of thing to try to soften the blow.
Right.
The February Consumer Price Index, which measures change in the cost of food, housing, gasoline, utilities, and other goods, rose by 7.9% over the past 12 months. Wow. The largest inflation surge in 40 years. Prices were up an additional 0.8% in February, according to the report. Of course, 3 weeks into March now, and that's kind of doubled. So this was bad news before the war, and now things are tightening because people are trying to get medical supplies and trying to hoard food and all those different kinds of things. And So Time Magazine, I think, is right on trying to speak to what people are interested in. Buy the magazine, I guess, or pay for the subscription. What's causing inflation? This is what they say. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a shock to the world economy. Now, if you're like us and believe that the plandemic was there, then then we're getting what was planned.
Right.
We've been duped. The COVID-19 plandemic caused a shock to the world economy, disrupting supply chains and contributing to major delays in shipping. Labor shortages and surging consumer demand have only exacerbated this problem, with many items in short supply and the cost of shipping going up. Prices are increasing. Guys, this is basic economics, supply and demand.
Yeah.
And of course, so that very principle was being attacked. How can we do that? And the pandemic was masterful. You may have noticed a hefty increase in the cost of vehicle, food, and fuel over the last few months. The latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows gasoline alone is up 38%. And energy prices up 26% over the last year. Used vehicle prices are up 41% for the year, and new vehicle prices have increased 12%. Food prices have also increased 8% year over year.
Not to mention homes. The prices of homes
not to
have
mention
gone.
everything.
Yeah.
Actually, everything. And so I mean, I think Trump was doing some right things. He was battling the right things, and he was making some of the right things. Just basic economics, he was doing the right things. You didn't have to like him to appreciate that he knew economics and he knew the deal. Mm-hmm. Let's defeat what China's trying to do with us, economic warfare, et cetera, et cetera. And the Democrats in that election burned the House down in order to win the election.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so now they're speaking some of the same talking points that the Republicans were talking in trying to now let's fix it. We burned it down. Now how do we fix it? And they're using some of the same talking points.
Because it's never been about policy. It's always been about power.
Yes.
Right.
It's always been about power. And, of course, with power is ideology, leftist ideology, et cetera, et cetera. Where are people feeling inflation the most, and what can you do to prepare and manage it? And I just find this is funny. Simple changes to your budget and spending habits, some planning and self-awareness. If you don't have a budget, now's a good time to start one. I mean, come on, time. That's what you're giving us. And, what about the single mother that she's already tapped out? She was tapped out under the Trump administration, and then the Biden administration comes, and now she's triple taxed out. There's no way they could possibly handle what's going on.
Well, and an idea of increased savings is to not believe inflation's happening.
Right.
Because savings is probably the hardest way you will get hit by the inflation tax.
Yeah. So you're working hard to savings, and your dollars are cut in half.
Right.
By the week.
You're saving 100%. You're saving 100 pennies today, and a month from now, or a year from now, those are going to be 50 pennies.
So time, is kind of inflating the obvious.
Right.
But then from an elitist down the nose position saying,
it's just okay. You just need to
rein in your spending a little bit.
Right.
Well, you're reining in your spending because you used to buy a bag of rice. Now you're getting a handful of rice for the same amount of money. What do you do about that? Mm-hmm. You got to fundamentally change what people think and what's going on. It's not about reining in your spending a little bit.
Well, and as an employer, I mean, I've had to pay my employees substantially more for them to feel like they can survive. And it is 100% true that people that are now making $15 an hour, which is the minimum wage in a lot of cases, aren't living any better than people a year ago, 12, 14, 18 months ago, were on $10 an hour, the minimum wage. So, the wages have gone up, but even if people are being frugal and spending, it's not helping.
The leftist ideologies have always, it's age old. They've always done this same kind of mentality. It's always been best to let people who want to work, get out of their way, and the natural supply side economics, which is just gravity, right? It's just the law of gravity, will work the best.
Yeah.
And then rely upon people taking care of their families and rely upon good people providing charity where it's needed. I'm glad we live in a place where our government and our societal contract says we're going to provide some welfare and we're going to provide a safety net for old folks and things like that. But that should not be the norm. And okay, we're going to live through our lives, surviving on this net. So let's just keep inflating the net and keep funding the net because then people aren't growing up and being the individual rugged economics, individuals.
Actually, the artificial manipulation of our economies is what's going to make this inflationary crash even more painful.
Right.
Because every politician, 4-year election cycles, has done everything artificially to avoid inflation because they don't want to be the one politically to have to pay that tax.
Right.
And so propping it up. And now you have a geopolitical a crisis.
Yeah.
And now we would contend a manufactured crisis, a planned crisis to bring that house of cards down.
Right.
And so we've been propped up and been elevated to a point, even elevated in a lifestyle that is going to make the crash hurt even more.
Right.
And then our willingness when the crash takes place, our willingness to trade liberty for a little bit of security, and that means financial security. Right. And I'm not talking about financial security like your 401k. We're talking about financial security like, can I eat today?
Right.
Can I have somewhere to live today?
And if you're a young person that's grown up in these ideologies and you have this vocabulary, that's how you think, you've got your phone and you're like, I can't DoorDash today.
Right.
How am I going to eat? They don't know other than to get Taco Bell and Mountain Dew Blast.
How I could eat.
Pull it. Seriously.
I can drive there?
Wait a second.
Yeah.
It just doesn't show up anymore.
But seriously,
we apologize to the young people listening right now. We don't think all of you are like that.
And to DoorDash.
But some of you are.
they don't know how to survive without their phone. Like they've never been in a world where there was no phone.
Right.
And so they can't even imagine what that would be like to live without that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's CNBC. How to rethink your budget to combat rising inflation. Same sort of idea, right? This is news today, and basically, the consumer price index rose 7.5% in January, 7.9% February, highest reading of the inflation gauge since February 1982. Nearly all categories measured by the index increased month over month, and all were higher than a year ago. Energy costs, food prices, used cars, trucks, etc., largest jumps ever. So this wasn't a war phenomena. So the government can't come out, the Biden administration can't come out and say, well, you're going to have to tighten your belts,
right,
because of the war. No. You're the one that, by your economic standards have brought us to this point, and now the war on top of it might just crush us. So here's what CNBC says. Number one, review prices. I read that and I thought, I've never heard those two words together. Review prices. You know what that's called? Shop.
Right.
Review prices.
Right.
It's like, I guess people just like buy the first thing on Amazon. Whatever Amazon suggests, that's what they buy.
Right.
And so review prices.
Who doesn't
shop
already
around a little bit. Go eBay and everything else first. Review prices. So comparative price.
That sounds capitalistic almost.
Yeah, it does. Set a new normal. I've never heard. What do you mean set a new normal? What does that mean? You just need to realize this is how it's going to be from here on out. Tighten your belt. It was good. Now it's not. It's Trump's fault. We're trying to fix it. And set the new normal.
But that's the credo of the communists.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like we don't want capitalist opulence.
Right.
You have bread. You have a domicile to live in. You exist for the state. You have no. Why are you complaining?
Right.
Like you have all that you need.
They never used the concepts of equality. No. They talked about egalitarianism and stuff like that. But the leftists over here are using different rhetoric to promote the same ideals that never work. And here's the third one that they say: boost savings. They're just coming up with a new vocabulary. Right. Increase your savings. Well, I'm saying, what about the people who never had a savings?
Right. Which is the last statistic I read on that, Dave Ramsey's book, said like 93% of people don't have a savings. So
56% of Americans couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency expense with savings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that means over half people don't have $1,000 that they could tap into or touch. And so thank you, Time. Thank you, CNBC.
I'd say it's
thank
more
you.
than that,
Yeah,
too.
you're promoting a leftist ideology, and now you're trying to help us in the fall to make an adjustment.
Right.
And I just kind of wanted to bring that out because I think people, whether you're watching Fox News or you're getting your news from online or whatever, just realize this is what you're getting. And this new vocabulary sounds like it's sophisticated, and it's really not.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically saying, yeah, tough.
Yeah.
Deal with it. That's really kind of what they're saying. And I thought that we could probably do a little bit better than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought we could probably do a little bit better than that, talking to folks out there. What can you do? And I always say every failure is a prayer failure. Mm-hmm. We know of missionaries that prayed the money in to feed the orphans, And so if you'll live your life that God's in control, he's on the throne, he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills and the gold in the hills, et cetera, et cetera. And so don't fret over mammon. Don't fret over money systems. Mammon and money systems are always kind of derogatory, are always kind of against, the Christian order or whatever in trusting God. But you have to start off with, I'm going to trust God in this. Mm-hmm. Biblical order says if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. And so what they didn't say is get another job. Work 2 jobs. They didn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. Right. They're saying, just you ate 2 pieces of bread. Now you need to eat 1 piece of bread a day.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But the idea is, no, you can work. You can be innovative. You can start a business. You can be the master of your own future. In those kinds of things. And so trust God, pray, and work. Go to work best you can. Don't just price shop. Or boost savings that you don't have. The way you do that is, go out and say, hey, what else can I do? How can I be innovative here?
Well, I always say in business, when things get tight, finances get tight, the first response is never cut costs. The first response is get more sales. But that's for a business. What does the everyday American do in that situation? I mean, it's not like they can just go get more money from their employer, maybe get a second job, but that's not even suggested here. Just make a few cuts, just adjust your budget, just save a little bit more money. And so the options seem like, oh, well, I can do that. And it's really not that accessible for people, like the way they make it sound.
Well, to answer what you're saying there, Tony, the response of people should be self-sufficiency.
Sure.
Yeah.
Self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
The more areas.
That's the goal. That's where I'm going to go from now on. I'm going to change. I can't trust the system. I got to be a little more self-sufficient.
The more areas, and barring living on an island, which is the dream of some of us, and totally separated. So it's not complete. It's not necessarily, maybe even tenable to have complete self-sufficiency, but categories of self-sufficiency in a person's life, that there's areas in your life that you have more control over. So for instance, right now they say save, put more in savings. Well, why would you put more money in a bank that's going to buy less beans later? Why not buy more beans now?
Sure.
Because you're going to need to eat the beans eventually. And so why not go and buy a bunch of beans now? Now listen, we're not talking about hoarders, or we're not even talking about surviving nuclear holocaust, although you probably want some beans then as well. So it works for a lot of applications, but it just makes good financial sense. Look at what you as a family will spend and what you will purchase for a living over the next 6 months. And why don't you pre-buy that 6 months worth of stuff right now? And in that way, that's your savings account. That is your savings account. And so
what I like about that is, we all kind of the bank's this invisible in between.
Right.
And, banks are at the root of the problem of the system. And so if you can get self-sufficient to where you just really only utilize the banks for what you need to utilize them for. That's not like that's the repository of your money and you have to go ask permission to get your money out, et cetera, and then they can deflate the percentages and then all of a sudden it's not there, or they can limit how much you're getting on a given day. They've done that in the past. And so, if you can get self-sufficient where it's maybe not just a cash situation, you're directing your future.
Make friends with a farmer.
Make friends with a farmer. Absolutely. Absolutely. Make friends with a farmer. Do some work on the farm. Help him out for a percentage or whatever. I've always had the vision and the dream, and I only have recently realized it by the grace of God. I won't even give myself a pat on the back, of owning a piece of property outright. So I can have my money in the bank and have it dissipating by the day through the invisibility of inflation, or I can bury that in a piece of land, which generally land is going to do as good, if not better, than any stock, gold, whatever. Over a period of time, that land's going to increase in value, unless you purpose to buy swampland. Hopefully there's oil in there or something.
Well, they're not making any more of it.
They're not making any more land. So, set some goals, self-sufficiency, own something outright, prepay the taxes. You're kind of insulated then when, you've got that, and provide for your family. I think everybody tries to have these big, pay off the mortgage and the car and all this kind of stuff, when really you need to feed your family. And it's okay to have that as a big thing that your money's going towards. You want your kids, well fed. So, I thought we would address the principles of the thing, but who can we blame? Who can we blame? I thought, well, what about leadership?
Obama.
Yeah, is it leadership? Is it leadership? Here is a couple articles. This one's by Forbes on measuring Biden's economy. Hank Tucker, for staff, writes that the Biden administration has a long list of metrics to make the case that the U.S. is enjoying the strongest economic recovery from COVID-19 in the world. Low unemployment, higher wages, a record $6.4 million jobs created in 2021. One number, however, could erase any gains, 7%. It represents the highest annual increase in inflation since 1982. So, you can stand over here and try to get a perspective through rose-colored glasses. You can look at this statistic and that statistic. But everybody really knows, like in this last year, things have tanked.
Right.
Things have tanked.
And there's a little bit of a bait and switch in those numbers, because those 6.4 million jobs represents the 6.4 million jobs they took from us in COVID.
Exactly. Right. People going back to work.
People are going back to work. It's not a job.
No.
That's not a job creation.
No, not at all. So they deal with inflation. Already has the Federal Reserve talking about a raise in borrowing rates. We've been pretty blessed, I think, over a number of presidencies in the borrowing rates. But I think the Fed meets this Wednesday, and they're talking about major boosts, like 25 points, 50 points, 75 points. And they said they're going to shock and awe the market. That's what they're saying. What that really means is it's bad and we got to do some drastic stuff. So we're going to see percentage points go up. That's going to not only affect the rate of purchases like cars and homes, I think it's going to shrink I mean, it's going to be, out of reach for a lot of people. And I think things were there in the past. I think by the early 80s, it was 14% to buy a house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty spectacular. But this is looking like it's going to go there, if not even worse. Then on the issue of labor, I like how they talked about unemployment versus job gains. That's just a matter of what word you're using, and you're looking at what side of the arc you're looking at, on the other side of the line. The energy crunch, the price of crude oil has risen 62% since inauguration day to $86 per barrel, the highest since 2014. And of course, this is an older article. Prices at the pump have nearly doubled last year to $3.30 a gallon. Of course, we're $1 higher, and they said in this article it's going to go up 30% more. So they were anticipating these prices minus the war, because this doesn't have anything. They're talking about just the economic indicators. $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. Remember that? That was it. That was what he touted during the election. And then he came in and said, I want this American Rescue Plan. Congress fought him on it. It was going to be $3 trillion. And they fought him down to $1.9 trillion. That was last March. And it's not quite providing the turbocharge Democrats have hoped for.
Right.
The American Rescue Plan was a major policy error that haunts us to this day. So does leadership affect economics?
Certainly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talks about stocks have declined 5%. The bond yield, I had my accountant said, I'm not doing stocks. I'm not doing bonds. I'm not doing NFTs. He's not doing. And I said, what about land? Like, that's when he said, yeah, that's probably just that's not like the best. It's just like, what else do you do? Consumer sentiment. I think this is huge in the American economy, because the American economy rules the world, right? And yet we rely on this University of Michigan consumer sentiment percentages. And what that means is how many people are trusting in the system and circling their money between work hard and then deposit it and then spend it and then borrow, and then this cycle. How many people are in that confidently? Because that's what every other country is counting on. And I find that's funny, because that sentiment is measured about 40 minutes away down the road here, as though that's the earthquake number on what's going to happen. And basically it says the survey registered a score of 67.4 in November of 2021, its lowest since 2011. The most recent reading earlier this month was 68.8. The score was 79 when Biden took office in January and rose in the first few months, but inflation and surges of COVID-19 variants in a seemingly never-ending pandemic have sent confidence spiraling. And so, Putin's not stupid. And so he's watching what's going on. And it wasn't like the war is causing our gas prices today and causing this scare that we're going on. They kind of go together, but the pandemic and the response to the pandemic forced us into the situation where we were spiraling, and it was really socialist lies.
And really tying together how close economies and emotions are held together.
Yeah.
So our economy is more, it's so much more, so the consumer confidence index, the idea of our emotions and our economy, because it's such a material system.
Yeah.
And
Talking about emotions, the emotion of, loving mammon or trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not into thine understanding. And so there is a difference in the Christian household, I believe, when it comes to the panic and the complaints. And, the Christians are already going to be somewhat measured, although probably everybody's now, tightening their belts. And then there's an Investopedia writes about comparing the economic plans of Trump and Biden, and starts off with the global pandemic, unemployment, not seen since the Great Depression. International Monetary Fund predicts U.S. global growth will be 3 percentage points weaker in 2021 compared to 2020. Of course, now we're in 2022. And says that as soon as we contain the virus, the economy will rebound sharply.
Right.
So we've got this fake thing that's can be manipulated.
Oh yeah.
And so that's definitely controlling the economy with a fake emotion. Really, we're manipulating people. And they go back into remember the V-shaped recovery? We're going to have a V-shaped recovery or whatever. The economic rescue plan. And, people, we all got checks in the economic rescue plan. And how's that working now?
We're paying for it.
Right.
I mean,
we're paying it back in the gas tank.
7-point plan that included mask mandate, more testing, ramping up personal protection equipment production, establishing a renewable fund for state and local governments, establishing $25 billion in vaccine manufacturing and distribution plan, and fixing the country's relationship with the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization was run by the Chinese, and we're going to fix that relationship with them. And then
how's that working for us right now?
Yeah, and so it goes into that was his plan. Here was Trump's plan. He signed 4 bills designed to offer relief to the American economy. So he was taking like a tidal wave in all these things, and in the process, he signed bills that he may or may not have needed to sign. Maybe he recognized or didn't recognize where this wave was coming from. But he signed the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriation Act, March 6, 2020, allocated $8.3 billion. Families First Coronavirus Response Act, March 18th. March 27th, Trump signed the $2 trillion CARES, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, and the force package, nicknamed Phase 3.5, was signed on April 24th, and basically refunds programs created in the CARES Act with $484 billion. Since that time, since Trump signed all those things, we found out how much crookedness. People were just grabbing money there.
Right.
You know, congressmen and senators were involved in organizations that were grabbing this money because they knew how to grab this money. If we compare the economic policies of the former Trump and the present Joe Biden, Trump provided few details for his plans for the economic during his second term outside of his 2021 budget proposal released in February, whereas Biden spelled it out better. Now, Biden spelled it out better. It was simplistic, but I think that hurt Trump.
Yeah.
Because he didn't really spend it out and people could just attack it. They both talked about infrastructure. They both talked about taxes. They both talked about health care, and they both talked about trade. So they all kind of measured those things. But if you just, Trump came out and said, if I were the president right now, Russia would not have invaded, period. And even though I don't like Trump, I kind of believe him because he had NATO. Everyone in NATO was increasing and taking their responsibility of their percentage of the funds. He had China backed off. Even on Hong Kong, he had him backed off. And maybe they just felt like he was crazy and they couldn't. Now was not the time. Maybe the pandemic was something that leftists in the world brought to reduce American power and definitely bring Trump down, so that then they could try to do this reset. We say that Putin doesn't like the Great Reset. We don't like the Great Reset either.
Right.
But it's just a matter of his reset or the European reset.
Right.
It's still a reset that resets without America,
right,
or with a weaker America.
Well, and what the statement you just said there kind of, and it's a little bit off topic, but redefines the lines away from the old Cold War lines of East and West.
Right.
It was such clear. I mean, we could draw the line on the map and say these are the good guys, those are the bad guys.
Right.
But now you're finding on different topics that our allies that would be in agreement on a particular topic may be more in the East or more be in the West. There is not that perfect symmetry anymore.
Yeah. And so NATO was a military alliance. Not everybody liked it or wanted to join it. Ukraine just said we don't even want it anymore. But they want to be part of Europe, the European Union, which is an economic entity. And that economic entity is including Turkey, some of the Middle East, and actually was in bed with Russia. And so that is kind of a changing of the lines at who's good, who's bad, and it's the money.
And depending on what we're talking about.
Yeah, what's the morality of the money?
Right. If we're talking about we're talking about fuel, we're all together. If we're talking about this, and it just doesn't. It changes.
So it is bad, the inflation and the rising costs. We can blame leadership. Of course, the United States, we elect the leadership, or we're duped on the promises of a free check.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And America's got to get over that.
Or the assurances of a free check.
Yeah, America's got to get over that. We got to quit electing someone who's promising us a check.
Right.
We've got to quit electing someone who's going to promise loan forgiveness for students or things like this. All these freebies always end up taking us back to the same negative cycle. So many times such that we're in this cycle without the war. Now we're blaming the war for the cycle.
Right.
Now, I think it's going to probably get worse.
Right.
And I think it's probably going to get tougher. And I think we probably are going to have now years to cycle through or get out of the thing if we have that.
Right.
I mean, is our economy broken for all time? And that's why I say the response isn't just your new norm. Your response is renew your trust in the Lord.
Right.
Renew your trust in the Lord. Realize that the biblical patterns are we're not living for money. The banking system is usually evil and crude, and we need to begin to not realize that we don't have to work within it. You know what I'm saying? We can still earn commodity to trade with, and we can still get substance that we need without being in the bank system and watching all the commercials on television and MasterCarding everything online. That's putting us in a trap. That's putting us in a trap individually and, as businesses and stuff like that too. We need to make sure that we can still have tangibility, that I'm working for this, it's in my hand, and I can trade it for that, which is something that I need without being evil, without being covetous. That's life. And it might sound old-fashioned, but it gives me the most control. It gives me the most economic defense, if you will, of continuance. And if we can make those adjustments, then maybe we can get through these rough times a little bit better. And I would say also maybe we need to make those adjustments together. Create purchasing groups. You can either go buy bread in the economic system, or you can have a bunch of people that are buying bread together, with the commodities that they're earning. So yes, it requires rethinking. Yes, it requires hunkering down. But the Christian worldview and the Christian perspective has us trusting the Lord,
right?
Determined to work, determined to get through this and fix it. And what's the problem? The problem isn't just I need to work more. The problem is this system is shrinking my money as we speak. This system is making me pay more for productivity than I need to pay. Yeah. And that's the kind of seed thought I think I'd want to put in people's minds, is to think it through as Christians and in Christian groups as well. I had someone the other day say, yeah, if we boycotted, we'd be boycotting everything. But, what are we doing to Russia? We're basically creating an economic boycott. And so it works and it's real. And the other thing I think that people might tend to do, Pastor Jay, this would probably be a nightmare scenario for a pastor, is people they're shrinking and they're determined, what am I going to spend my money on? And there goes their tithe. There goes missions, man. I mean, missionaries are suffering because sometimes that's not the first thing people give to. It's the last thing, or it's the superficial thing people give to. And you should speak to that.
Well, it just depends. Yeah. It depends on what system people are living in. And if you are simply living in this world system, then inflation and what we're talking about ought to scare you. It ought to terrify you, because the gods of your world are about to bring down, as Vladimir Lenin said, the millstones of taxation and inflation on you.
Yeah.
And they're going to grind you. They're going to grind you out.
It's a lying system.
Right.
It promises you something and it lies to you.
And so if you're living in that system, we as Bible advocates, we reject the tyranny of a man between us and God.
Right.
And so you think about, in the sense of economics, we can appreciate the farmer.
Yeah.
Because the farmer stands on the threshold between him and God.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, I'm going to plant this seed and I'm praying to God that it rains.
Soil, sunshine,
right.
rain.
And so there's no one in between.
Yeah.
There's no one in between him and his labor and God blessing his labor. And he very much gets it that even as hard as he works, he needs the blessing of God.
Yeah.
He needs something bigger than himself, someone bigger than himself. Of course, that's the God of the Bible, to bless him and all that. And so when we think about inflation here and in these systems, the Bible speaks about these things. Think about what the Lord said to the children of Israel in the book of Haggai. So Haggai, the Lord says to Israel, consider your ways. You have sown much and bring in little. You eat, but you have not enough. You drink, but you're not filled with drink. You clothe you, but there is none warm. He that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes.
There you go.
I mean, that is inflation. Yeah. And so what should inflation, or what should worldly economic pressures do to the Bible advocate or Bible believer? Yeah. It should cause them to consider their ways.
Yes.
And in considering their ways, beyond the prudence of financial stewardship, is because what God is dealing with Israel is, because he's saying here, because you have not regarded my temple, because you have regarded yourself over my temple, I have brought economic inflation.
Yes.
I have caused inflation. I have allowed inflation to happen with you, and it's going to stay there until you consider your ways.
Your Bible culture of trusting me and not mammon, and not working after yourself, that Bible culture is going to give you a land of flowing with milk and honey. You're not going to give you a land. I'm going to give you.
I'm going to give it to you.
And that's a perfect segue, because our last talking point here is about how culture shapes economic outcomes. Brookings Institute basically did a joint study, had 8 articles where they've had highly regarded economists and psychologists. Each article considers a specific societal factor that research has shown to be important to economic and social incomes. Number 1, religious institutions. Isn't that interesting? I mean, they're looking at it from a secular point of view, and yet they're saying that one of the number 1 things that affects economic outcomes is the culture of religious institutions. And then they say parenting practices, family structure, role models, mental and media influences, peer and family effects, social capital and networks, beliefs about opportunity and mobility, and discrimination. And so, they're being entirely woke with how they're studying economics and the cultural effect of economics. In other words, if you're born poor black in South Philadelphia, that you're going to have a different economic outcome. I mean, that's kind of where they're coming from. And yet the reality is they say, well, your religious institution's going to make a difference. So we shouldn't foster a wokeness that says you're a victim.
Right.
And so everybody should give you reparations or make it equal on your part or something like that. But we should say that somehow, if you're a good person, you've got a moral values, and you're working through life with your family, and you're sticking with your wife, and you're raising your kids, you're going to get better economic outcomes. And so it's not really a spiritual article, but it says that culture affects economy. And so Bible Nation Society is about Bible in culture, and that a biblical culture will produce the best results every single time. If you look at it historically, right? The best culture is a Bible culture. It's proven and it works.
Yeah.
And then here's a final article, hec.edu, Culture and Economy, Understanding the Dynamics of Globalization. And it says economy and culture influence each other, period. The decision to transmit a cultural heritage is a compromise between preferences, cost, and access to information. An economic shock, such as opening of a market, can bring about permanent changes in personal values, cultures, and preferences in a way not easily reversible. And what that's saying is that in globalization, we talked about this before the program, how young people are adopting globalization. And so you've got young people around the world from different kind of languages and cultures, but they all have a phone. And they're all shopping the same way, and they're all dressing the same way, and they're all buying the same products the same way with a touch of their smartphone, and they're trusting the banking system to be even more comprehensive and understand everything they're looking at and shopping. Yeah, whatever.
Their money is a number. They don't have physical money.
It's out there, yeah. And so their value is kind of associated with this, whereas the older generation's not doing that. And so there's a huge cultural divide between young and old. Huge cultural divide between young and old. So that's negative. Because that is your religious preferences, that is your family, that is your parentage, that is those kinds of things. So you got a broken culture in this globalization. It's had a negative effect that is irreversible, and that's what this is saying. And this isn't a religious organization. It's saying that this is something that we're dealing with that is creating an economy to where we're at a point of no return. Either we go all in on globalization, a one world monetary order, a great reset, et cetera, or we're just going to have the divide. So they would probably say that gas prices are because old people aren't changing. You know what I'm saying? That the culture isn't changing, or that the Christian right, isn't allowing women to have their rights over their bodies.
And what you're talking about, this globalization, is the inevitable unless someone stops it.
The Bible says that in the last days, there's going to be a man with a number, and people won't buy and sell unless they're doing that. So it's economic. It's economic tyranny, and that's kind of where we're headed. So we're not saying this is the Antichrist, but we're saying there are definitely steps that we're headed towards that we should be aware of and probably strive not to go that direction and see the inherent morality or good and evil of it as we're going there, because in the last days, it says that a loaf of bread will be a day's wage.
Yeah, Revelation 6:6.
Yeah.
No, everyone's like, you guys are, well, I don't know if everybody, I'm assuming there's an assumption that people go, y'all bring it back to apocalyptic things.
Yeah.
But we can't help that all the things that are happening today sound kind of apocalyptic.
Right.
Because Revelation 6:6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. And so economic inflation, economic instability, economic tyranny.
Yeah.
Economic tyranny. And so to go along with everything else, because you're talking about the young people, the digital tyranny. And what's the digital tyranny? It's placing another mediator, another layer between the person and the source. And that's what all these layers of modernity and technology are placing. And let's go back to this way. You got to appreciate the farmer, and not that we worship farmers. I'm saying is you got to appreciate the person who is connected to the dirt, dependent upon God.
That's feeding the rest of us.
Right.
And in 1933, the New Deal, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he was a socialist. He liked Uncle Joe, Stalin, and those new ideas.
Right.
And he created the New Deal, which was like Biden's Build Back Better. Same bunch of principles about, free government spending, and you get in line to get your free government spending, et cetera, et cetera. It was a leftist ideal, and what did we have by 1939? Time, we just read a Time magazine, made Adolf Hitler Man of the Year, and in 1939, we're engaged in World War II.
Right.
Yeah,
And so,
right.
I mean, those who have been around and who have studied that, looked at that, whatever, is saying, it wasn't a Bible culture. It wasn't a rugged individualist culture where a man works. It was where the government solves the problems. We're going to trust in the mammon system, and it's going to provide for us. And look what that did even to America. And, that was kind of par for the course in the rest of the world. And so here we are again. And so economic hard times are nothing new. How you respond to them is going to be determinant about how we go forward. And so if people don't like the times they're in, that they're partially responsible for the times we're in by who they voted for, what their behavior has been, what they've been trusting in, the system that they've put their social contract in and that they're functioning in without any complaint. I have a smartphone. I've complained about it the whole time, the whole way, and fought and everything about that. But some people never. They just are hungry and thirsty to get the next thing that they can do and tie them in. I don't like the bank. I've complained about the bank from day one, and some people that's just part of their life. They don't understand. They don't understand anything other than I work, and then somehow that goes to the bank, and somehow I get something from the bank. And they're in that system, and they think that's that becomes God. That's the God that they pray to. Lord, help me to pay these bills. And it's something that it's not tangible. They don't totally control it. They don't understand it, but they trust in it. And we're in the stage we are today, and it's sad, and we need to adjust ourselves and how we get through it, and hopefully we get through it together. It is leadership's responsibility, and I would say left and right. If you look at the last year's statistics, it makes Biden look really bad. Yeah. But if you look at the last 40 years, you'll see that Democrats and Republicans are both responsible for the trends. And most people just kind of don't have the foresight to look at all of that. But then lastly, this is a result of culture. This is why I say our culture is best if it's virtuous. Our culture is best if it believes the Bible, if it embraces the biblical ideas of family, the biblical ideas of morality and neighborly activity and exchange. The Bible talks a lot about monetary theory, about the guy that works hard and sells his product, right? And
the sluggard.
Yeah, and then what he's getting for that, and all those kinds of things. And but when we leave that and we start to just be wooed and seduced into a different system, then we get to the point like this, and we're just subject to it. I think the proposition today is, we don't have to be subject to this. You can reject the system that you're in. You can go a different way. You don't have to just listen to Time and CNBC and say, well, the experts say that I just have to do, boost my savings and and these new vocabulary words that just have old ideas. But you can reject the system itself. You can start to extract yourself from it. You can not trust it. You can trust God. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. I might have to use a dollar. I might have to take the mammon or whatever and use it, but I'm not going to be about it. And that will insulate you somewhat from what's going on. And nothing else. People are having heart attacks because they're paying for $5 for gas. Yeah. And we might have to pay $5 for gas, but we don't have to have a heart attack over it.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. There's if you're not in this system, if you are playing the game, and what I mean by that is the game of life in God's system, then you don't have to be afraid. Yeah. You don't have to be afraid. And so don't react by fear. Don't live by fear. Don't waste a day on this earth that God gives you to live by wasting it in fear. So don't be a fear, and even economic fear.
You know what I like about tithing is that it's just a percentage. Doesn't matter the amount. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It's the tithe. That's the first fruit. It's the 10%, and it is the first. That's what it is. It's the order of importance is what it is. It's It's the first bill that you pay, so to speak. You're not paying for your salvation. You're not paying the church to exist. You're not paying the pastor to live. You're honoring God with you're saying, God, I'm in your system. Because the world doesn't do that system. They don't understand that system. Right. But that's kind of what that's really about. And I would say in these troubled times, make sure that you're saying, you know what, my first fruits. Right. My first fruits I'm giving unto the Lord to say, I'm not part of the system, I'm not trusting this system. I'm just gonna give to the Lord. God always blesses that. He always blesses that. Jesus saw the widow gave her mite and said that's more than the rich man given of his excess. You know, and so I think that's wise economic counsel, to just show yourself, discipline yourself, and show the Lord, I'm in this. I'm trusting in you, right, as I get this. Now, Tony, business, I feel sorry for you, man, because every dollar just got deflated. So how do you cope? What are you going to tell your fellow businessmen to labor with you through this?
Well, again, I always say this. I mean, having faith in God, it just, I don't worry. I don't fear. I certainly feel everything. The business feels everything. I would say practically to business owners, just practically speaking. I mean, know your costs. Yeah. Look at all your prices. Are you charging up? If the cost of your goods has gone up, you got to pass that along, but do that with empathy. Yeah. Have communication with your consumers, with your customers, but also have empathy for your employees who are dealing with this as well. If your first gut reaction is to retreat, cut costs, get cheap on everything, that might not be a wise mindset. Right. It's really go back to the drawing board and look at what you're doing, look at the cost of everything, and figure out how you can adjust without making it a huge, drastic change, and push through it. I think the entrepreneurial spirit that you had that got you in it and got you going, you just got to get creative and think of ways through. But I think spiritually speaking, to the individual or to the Christian business owner, we talk about a Bible culture. It's the best culture is a Bible culture. It's proven and it works. But to the individual, I would ask, are you living a Bible culture yourself? The Bible says, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Paul from a Roman prison said, I have all and abound. He said to the Philippians, my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. So Paul was living a Bible culture. He was in no way in a financially or economically good situation. He said, I know how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everything and all things I'm instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. And then he said, I can do all things through Christ which strengthens me. So he really had that mindset because he was living that Bible culture. He had the value on the right things. And when you value this world's system, then you're going to be freaking out, like Pastor Jason said. But if your mind and heart truly is with him and your value is doing what he wants you to do, then it's just another day, and you just trust him. And if it's true that where your treasure is, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. I would say, give more. Yeah. If kind
of by the
system
principle
you value, give more.
Yeah. God, and the thing is, there's going to be people who need. Yeah. So it's not going to be hard to find them and to just say, you know what, we're all going to be hungry. I'm not going to eat steak. I'm going to be eating peanut butter and jelly, but everyone else is going to eat peanut butter and jelly with me. Right. Because I'm going to make sure that goes. And the fool has said in his heart, there is no God, the Bible says. And it's a foolish nation that disregards God and tries to lean on the central bank or the economic indicators or the rich men's wisdom or something like that and then disregard God. Blessed is the nation whose God is not mammon, but is the Lord. Don't put your trust in money. Put your trust in the Lord. Jesus went away and said, I'm coming back. I'm preparing a place for you. The Bible says Abraham was looking for a city whose builder and maker is God. John was revealed this city. It was a city of such gold and wealth and beauty and precious stones. It was the best words he could use for this place, And the Proverbs say that we're going to have pleasures forevermore. If we have money, we think we can go out to eat. We can go shopping. We can go on vacation. We can go on a boat. We can go this. We can all this, wonderful stuff. But pleasures forevermore. And so, we have one foot in this earth. Right. What do you value? But we also have our spiritual interests and our spiritual walk is in the Lord. Yeah. And say whatever hardship I'm having right now is not to be compared to that time. And that's what Paul was laughing about. He was kind of Viking about it, like I'm not worried about being hungry today because there'll be a day when I'm sitting down eating that great supper. Right. And when people have that as their culture, as their mindset, as their go-to to cope and to have hope and to make decisions, man, it's the best culture. It's proven and it works.